I'm going to start today with something that happened to a mom I worked with. She called me, and I could hear it the second she picked up. That specific kind of exhausted, not tired from not sleeping, tired from trying so hard for so long and still feeling like it's not working. She said, I don't know what's wrong with my son. He won't listen. He won't talk to me. He explodes over nothing. And then 5 minutes later, he acts like it never happened. I've tried everything. I've taken things away. I've given him more freedom. I've done the charts, the rewards, the consequences. I've read the books. And I'm starting to wonder if something is just broken in him. And I want to talk to you today about that word, broken, because I hear it all the time. Parents say it about their kids, and if I'm honest, they're usually saying it about themselves at the same time. And I want to offer something different today. Not a parenting hack, not 5 steps, just a different way of seeing. Because here's what I believe with everything in me. Your child is not the problem. And by the end of this conversation, I hope you'll believe it too. Welcome to Not Broken. I'm Tiffany Roberts, and this show exists because I got tired of watching families suffer through problems that nobody was naming correctly. We talk about children's mental and emotional health, but not in the way you usually hear about it talked about. We talk about parenting, but not in a way that makes you feel guilty for every mistake. We talk about healing, real healing, which is messy and slow and nothing like what Instagram makes it look like. If you're a parent who is exhausted, confused, scared, or quietly wondering if you're already messed everything up, this is for you. Let's go. So let's start with the thing nobody wants to say out loud. When a child is struggling, when they're explosive or shut down or anxious or defiant or just impossible to reach, the default move in our culture is to look at children and ask, what's wrong with them? We take them to the doctor, we diagnose, we adjust medication, we find a therapist, we research their type, we read about their disorder, we make accommodations, we build systems around the way they are. And listen, I'm not saying none of this is useful. Some of it genuinely helps. But underneath it all, there's this quiet, persistent belief. The child is the problem. Fix the child, solve the child. And parents absorb this too. They start to see their child as a problem to be solved. And the child, who is perceptive in the way we constantly underestimate, starts to feel it. They feel like the problem. They feel broken. And here's what I want you to consider today. What if the behavior isn't the problem? What if the behavior is a message? What if the explosion isn't defiance? It's a nervous system that never learned to regulate because no one showed it how. What if the shutdown isn't laziness or manipulation? It's a child who learned that disappearing is safer than being seen. What if the anxiety isn't the disorder? It's a child who absorbed the tension in a home that nobody talked about, and their body is doing exactly what bodies are supposed to do when they sense danger. These aren't radical ideas. They're actually well supported by decades of research in developmental psychology, neuroscience, and trauma informed care. But they haven't made it to the average parent's living room yet. That's what this show is for. Here's a story our culture tells about difficult children. You know the story. You've probably told it to yourself. Maybe someone told it to you when you were a child. The story goes like this: a child who behaves is a good child. A child who doesn't behave is a problem child. The parent's job is to get the problem child to behave. But if they can't, the child is broken, or the parenting is failing, or both. This story is everywhere. It's in the schools, it's in churches, it's in the comments section of every parenting post online. It's the advice of well meaning grandparents and pediatricians and neighbors. This story causes enormous harm, not because people telling it are bad, but because the story misses the most important question entirely. Not what is wrong with this child, but what happened to this child. Not why won't they listen, but what are they trying to tell me? Not how do I make them stop, but what do they need that they're not getting? The shift from the first set of questions to the second set, that's the entire show. That's the whole journey we're going on together. Let me give you some context here because I don't want this to just be my opinion. This landmark study, the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, it was done in the late 1990s through Kaiser Permanente. And it was one of the most significant pieces of research in the last 50 years of human health and behavior. What they found across tens of thousands of participants is that childhood experiences of stress, trauma, instability, and emotional neglect don't just affect how kids feel. They affect how kids develop biologically, neurologically. The architecture of the brain itself is shaped by what happens to a child before they're old enough to understand or articulate it. A child who grows up in a home with chronic tension, even if there's no violence, even if everyone loves each other, the child's nervous system learns to stay on alert. Their brain learns to prioritize survival over connection. Their body learns to react before their mind can think. And if we look at that child and say, what's wrong with you? Why are you so reactive? Why can't you just calm down? You're asking their brain to do something their brain was literally never taught to do. That's not a character flaw. That's biology responding to environment. And here's the part that matters most for you as a parent. That can change. The brain is not fixed. Development is not over. The experiences a child has today are still shaping who they become, which means you still have enormous influence, not through control, but through connection, not through correction, but through understanding. That's the good news underneath all of this. I want to spend some time now getting specific because I find that when we talk about all of this in the abstract, people nod along and then they go home to their actual child and still don't know what to do differently. So let me talk about some of the most common things parents bring to me, the things they call the problem. And I want to show you what I actually see when I look at them. The defiant child, the one who argues about everything, the one who says no before you finish the sentence, the one who has to have the last word, who pushes back on every rule, who seems to take personal offense at being told what to do. Parents are exhausted by this child and honestly scared of them because defiance in children often brings up something deep in parents, a feeling of losing control, a fear that this child will grow up to be someone who can't function in society, a worry that you're raising a child nobody will ever like. I understand that fear. But here's what I see when I see a defiant child. I see a child who learned that their voice didn't matter and decided they were going to make it matter anyway. I see a child who may have had experiences of powerlessness, of being controlled, not being heard, and having their feelings dismissed or overruled. And their nervous system adapted to making them fight for autonomy in every turn. I see a child who is actually showing incredible strength, misdirected sometimes, exhausting, absolutely. But the will to resist, to push back, to insist on being heard, that's not nothing. That's a child who hasn't given up. The question isn't how do I make this child stop fighting? The question is, what are they fighting for? And can I help them get it in a way that works for both of us? Then there's the other end of the spectrum, the child who gets quiet, who closes down, who retreats to their room and you can't get through to them, who says, I'm fine, when they're clearly not, who shuts off like the light switch when emotions get too big. The child is often less alarming to parents on the surface. They're not explosive. They're not causing scenes. But inside, parents often tell me this child scares them more because they can't reach them. What do I see in a child who shuts down? I see a child who learned that expressing emotion wasn't safe. Maybe it wasn't actively punished, like stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. We all know that. Maybe it was met with overwhelm, a parent who couldn't handle big feelings and fell apart, which made the child feel responsible. Maybe it was simply not responding to a child who cried and no one came. Enough times that crying stopped feeling like it worked. So they learned to go inside, to manage alone, to become self-contained. And now you're trying to reach them and they don't know how to let you in because letting people in historically didn't work. So the shutdown child doesn't need you to push through the walls. They need you to prove slowly over time that the walls aren't necessary anymore. Anxiety in children is an epidemic levels right now. The statistics are staggering, and the most common response is medication, therapy, strategies, which again can help. But before we get to all of that, what is anxiety actually doing? Anxiety is the body's alarm system. It's saying something here feels threatening. And that alarm doesn't distinguish well between physical danger and emotional danger. It doesn't know the difference between a bear and a test at school. It just knows threats detected. So when a child is chronically anxious, when the alarm is going off constantly, It's worth asking, what does this child's environment feel like to their nervous system? Is there unpredictability at home? Is there tension they can feel but can't understand? Is there pressure, spoken or unspoken, to perform, to achieve, to be a certain way? Have they experienced something that taught their nervous system that the world is not safe? Anxiety is not irrational. It's the body doing its job based on the information that it has. Our job isn't to talk a child out of anxiety. Our job is to help them feel safe enough that the alarm doesn't have to keep going off. And then there's the child who just melts down, who loses it completely over what looks like nothing: a broken cracker, a sock that feels wrong, a plan that changed. Parents find this one really hard to have compassion for because it looks so disproportionate. He completely lost it because I cut his sandwich the wrong way. What's wrong with him? Here's what's wrong. His nervous system doesn't have the capacity to regulate in that moment. That's it. The sandwich is not the issue. The sandwich is the straw that broke the camel's back after a day of holding it together. After navigating social pressure at school, after censoring inputs that were too much, after a night of not sleeping well, after a morning that was rushed, you name it. By the time the sandwich happened, his nervous system was already at capacity, and the sandwich was just the thing that made the cup overflow. We look at the cup overflowing and say, this is about the sandwich, but the cup was already full. Our job is to understand what's filling the cup and to help build a bigger cup over time through regulation, through safety, through co-regulation, which we'll talk about in future episodes. Okay, now I need to say something that I want you to hear with compassion toward yourself. Everything I just described, the defiance, the shutdown, the anxiety, the overwhelm, these don't happen in a vacuum. Children develop in relationship, which means the environment that shaped them, you were part of that environment. I know. That's hard to hear. But I want to say this clearly as I can. This is not about blame. Because here's the thing about parents who are sitting with me, who've found this show, who are asking these questions. They're not bad parents. They're not cruel parents. They are parents who are doing the best they can with what they are given. And most of them were given very little. Most parents I work with were raised in homes where feelings weren't talked about, where behavior was managed through punishment and reward, where love was conditional on performance, where stress was absorbed in silence, where the adults were struggling but nobody named it. And they became adults and they had children and they started parenting the only way they knew how. And it's not working. Not because they're failures, but because the tools they were given were built for a different goal. The tools were built for compliance. And what their child actually needs is connection. So when I say you are part of this, I don't mean you caused this on purpose. I don't mean you're a bad person. I mean you are in the story. And that means that you have influence. And that is actually good news. Let me tell you something that I think will resonate with you a lot. Most of what we do as parents we do automatically. We don't think about it. We react. And in moments when we react, what comes out is usually what is put into us. The tone of voice that comes out when you're at the end of your rope probably sounds a lot like someone in your childhood. The way you respond to your child's tears, whether you move toward them or freeze up or get irritated, that's probably a learned pattern, not a chosen one. The way you handle conflict, the way you use silence, the way you comfort or don't, these are inherited patterns, grooves worn into us over years of watching the adults around us navigate life. None of this means that you're doomed to repeat it, but it does mean if you want to parent differently than you were parented, you have to do some work, not just on the strategies and techniques, on yourself. That is the conversation this show is going to keep going back to, because healing your child and healing yourself, they're not two separate projects. They're the same one. I want to talk about fear-based parenting because I think it's more common than we admit. And I think most parents who are doing it don't know they're doing it. Fear-based parenting doesn't mean you're a scary person. It means that underneath your parenting, fear is a primary driver. Fear that your child will turn out wrong, fear that what other people will think, fear of losing control, fear of your child's emotions because they trigger something within you, fear of the future, fear of failure. And fear makes us contract. It makes us control. It makes us rigid. It makes us reactive. A parent operating out of fear cannot offer a child what they need most, which is felt safety, because you can't give what you don't have. When I'm afraid, my nervous system is activated. When my nervous system is activated, I'm not in a state to co-regulate my child. I'm in a state of survival. And two nervous systems in survival don't connect. They collide. This is why the work of parenting differently starts with the parent. Not because you're the problem, but because you are the environment. And the child's nervous system is always, always reading the environment. If you can do your own work, if you can learn to regulate yourself, to understand your own triggers, to heal your own wounds, you become a different kind of environment for your child. Not perfect, but safer. And safer is everything. Okay, I've been heavy for a little while, so let me shift. I want to give you something concrete today, a different way of looking at your child that you can start practicing as soon as this episode is over. It's not a technique, it's a question. One question. Instead of asking, what is wrong with my child? Ask, what is happening inside of my child right now? That's it. That's one shift changes everything. Because when you ask what is wrong, you're looking for defects. You're in judgment mode, and judgment creates distance. When you ask what is happening inside, you're looking for information. You're in curiosity mode, and curiosity creates connection. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. So scenario 1, we have the meltdown. Your 7-year-old has just completely lost it because you told them they need to stop playing and come to dinner. They're screaming, they're on the floor, they're saying they hate you. So the old lens is, what is wrong with this child? This is ridiculous. This behavior is unacceptable. I need to shut this down. Our new lens What is happening inside my child right now? So let's think about it. They're in the middle of something that mattered to them. Play is a child's whole world, the way they're processing everything. This transition was abrupt. Their brain doesn't have the prefrontal cortex development to manage transitions easily yet. This doesn't fully develop until their mid-20s. They're overwhelmed. Their body has taken over. This isn't manipulation. This is dysregulated nervous system doing what a dysregulated nervous system does. So, what do they need? Not a consequence, not a lecture. They need to feel safe enough that their nervous system can come back online, which means you need to be calm first. We talk about how to do this in upcoming episodes, okay? So stay tuned. Then presence, then connection. Then, when they're regulated again, then you can talk about dinner or expectations or behavior. But in the moment of dysregulation, the only thing that works is co-regulation. Your calm becoming their calm. Scenario 2, the lie. Your 12-year-old lied to you. You found out about it. You're hurt. You're angry. And part of you is scared because what kind of person lies to their parent? The old lens, this child has a character problem. I need to address this firmly. I need to make it clear that lying is not acceptable and there is a serious consequence. The new lens, what is happening inside of my child that made lying feel safer than the truth. Because here's the thing about lying. Kids lie when they believe the truth will cost them something that they can't afford to lose. Your approval, your love, their safety, and their freedom. A child who lies constantly is a child who has learned that telling the truth is risky. This doesn't mean that you don't address it. It doesn't mean that there's no consequences. But the most important conversation is not how could they lie to me? It's what made you feel like you couldn't tell me the truth. And that conversation might be the most important one that you've had with your child in years. Scenario 3, the shutdown. Your teenager comes home from school and goes straight to their room. You try to talk to them. You get one-word answers. You feel shut out. You're worried. Maybe you're a little hurt. Maybe you push harder. They push back harder. The door closes. The old lens, they don't want to talk to me. Something's wrong. I need to get in there and find out what's happening. The new lens, what does my child need right now? And is talking to me actually it? Sometimes teenagers need decompression time before they can connect. Their nervous system has been on all day, performing, navigating peers, managing the social complexity of adolescence, and they need to be off before they can be present. The conversation that you try to force at 3:30 when they walk into the door might happen naturally at 8 p.m. if you give them space. And the relationship that makes the 8 p.m. conversation possible is built in 1,000 small moments where you didn't push, where you were available without demanding, where your presence was safer than pressuring. You build the bridge before the calm, and then the bridge is there when you need it. I want to say something about what happens to the relationship when you make this shift. When a child feels like they're the problem to be solved, they feel it. Children are extraordinarily perceptive. They read the energy behind our words, our sighs, our expressions. They know when we're frustrated with them versus curious about them. And a child who feels like a problem starts to act like one. It becomes a self-fulfilling story. But a child who feels genuinely seen, who feels like adults in their life are actually curious about their inner world, actually interested in what's happening inside them, that child starts to trust. And trust is the foundation of everything. You can't teach a child who doesn't trust you. You can't influence a child who doesn't feel safe with you. You can't reach a child who shuts you out. Connection is not the soft, optional alternative to discipline. Connection is a prerequisite for everything. Okay, I want to spend the last part of our time today on something that I think is rarely talked about in parenting content. We talk a lot about what to do, the strategies, the techniques, the responses, but we almost never talk about what healing actually feels like from the inside for the parent, for the family, for the child. And I think it's important because a lot of parents come to me expecting healing to look like I learn the right things, I do the right things, my child gets better, and life becomes easier. And it does happen, but it doesn't actually look the way they expect. Healing is not a straight line upward, it looks more like a spiral. You revisit the same themes at different depths. You think you've figured something out, and then 6 months later, you're in it again, but from a different angle. A child who's been struggling for years does not transform in a month. A parent who grew up in a difficult home does not undo decades of conditioning in a single therapy session. Real healing is slow, it's incremental. It's often invisible until suddenly it's not. Until one day you realize your child hasn't had a meltdown for 3 weeks, or they came to you with something they never would have before, or you handled a moment of a conflict in a way your parents would never have, and you didn't even think about it. It becomes who you are, but it does take time. Here's what I've seen happen when families make the shift. When they stop seeing a child as the problem and start seeing a child as a person with an inner world that's trying to communicate something. The child stops being on defense because they're no longer waiting to be corrected or fixed. They feel met instead. The parent stops being exhausted in the same way because they're no longer in power or struggle. They're in a relationship. Relationships are hard, but they're not the same kind of hard as a constant battle. The behaviors, the defiance, the shutdown, the explosions, they don't disappear overnight, but they start to shift because the need underneath them starts to get met. And when the need is met, the signal doesn't have to be so loud anymore. And something else happens. When I find the most beautiful part of all of this, the parent starts to heal too. Because when you start being curious about your child's inner world, you usually start getting curious about your own. And you start to realize, oh, I was the child once. I had the same experience. And nobody ever asked me those questions either. And something in you starts to grieve. And something in you starts to get gentler with yourself. And that gentleness comes out in how you parent. And that's the most profound things I get to witness in this work. So let me offer you a new definition of healing to carry with you today. Healing is not the absence of struggle. It's the presence of safety. It's a child who knows they are not the problem to be solved, but a person being known. It's a parent who can stay present in hard moments instead of shutting down or blowing up. It's a family where feelings can exist out loud, where mistakes don't cost people their belonging, where repair happens after rupture, where the hard things get named. That's what we're building here. That's the not broken vision, not perfection, not the absence of struggle, just a different way of being in it together. If you made it to the end of this episode, I want you to know something. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're asking these questions, the fact that you're willing to consider a different way of seeing your child and yourself, that matters. Most people don't do this. Most people keep doing what was done to them because that's all they know. The fact that you're here means something has already shifted in you, and that matters enormously for your child. So I want to give you one thing to do before we talk again. Just one. This week, pick one moment when your child does something that would normally frustrate you or worry you. One moment when you did normally go to what is wrong with them, and instead get curious. Ask yourself, just internally, you don't have to say anything to your child. What is happening inside them right now? What might this behavior be trying to tell me? You don't have to have the power. Curiosity doesn't require answers. It just requires openness. And that's it. That's the whole assignment. And if you want to go deeper, if this conversation stirred something in you and you want tools, community, and a real path forward, I'd love to have you come explore what I've built for exactly this journey. One more thing before I let you go. You love your child. I know that. Whatever has brought you here, frustration, fear, confusion, heartbreak, underneath all of that is love. And love is where it all starts. Your child is not broken, and neither are you. I'll see you in the next episode. We called it discipline. It was actually fear. Next time on Not Broken, we're going to talk about the thing nobody wants to admit, how fear has been driving the parenting bus and what it costs everyone in the vehicle.